Now, I have mentioned that in a previous YouTube that the Central Intelligence Agency was connected with the death of Pope John Paul I. Now, why in the world would they have an interest in that? Well, it has to do with a business arrangement between the French people in the drug business, the Italians in the drug business, and the Central Intelligence Agency in the drug business, because they made fortunes that they could use on other black projects that they couldn't get money from the government for. And so that's what they did for going back before the Vietnamese War. I think the Dien Bien Phu was in 1951. And that's where the North Vietnamese under Ho Chi Minh and General Giap ran the French out of Dien Bien Phu. They surrendered there. All of those countries, those little countries like Vietnam and Laos, Cambodia, just ridden with opium growth. And all of that was used by these different people. French connection, the Italians, and bringing it in to the United States, Central Intelligence Agency, selling it to whoever to raise money for their operations. Conversations with the Crow is another name for it. Could be the extension of regicide. Same people, conversations, giving the writer the opportunity to tell something that otherwise would never be told. So we're going to give you an excerpt from the book, which you could even get it on Kindle, which is Conversations with the Crow. Sometimes you have to read it, listen to it a long time before you get the information, but if you listen, you get a lot of information. Here they're talking about the murder of Pope John Paul and the motive behind it. Conclave prior to the selection of the Pope. A number of the cardinals for a couple of years have been concerned about Vatican Bank's accounting procedures. And so they had spoken quite a bit about it before they started voting. They got everybody to agree that whoever became the Pope, they would hire outside accounting sources. Pope John Paul decided within the first 2 weeks that he was the Pope, he started looking for the right accounting company. They knew he was going to find out everything, and they got his doctor and threatened him. And the doctor gave him the big heart attack pill that they were known for.
The following is a transcript from a phone call between Robert Crowley, the Crow, and Gregory Douglas. We went after John Paul I. We also went after John Paul II, but that one didn't work out, and we didn't want to try it again. Why in God's name did you want to kill the Pope? And out of curiosity, how'd you pull it off? The first one was going to put a terrible crimp in our drug business out of Italy, and we tried to do the second one to blame the Russians. It was sort of a game with us. Always try to do a bad bit and make it look like the Russians did it. The drug business. What did the Pope have to do with drugs? He didn't. It was the bank there that did. He had nothing to do with it, but it was the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank was involved with drugs? No, we used it to launder money. Who, I ask you, would ever question the Vatican Bank? It was the mafia who had the inside bank contacts. And believe me, there was a lot of money moving around. Let's see, the Pope was elected in, I think, August of 1979. He replaced Montini, former Vatican Secretary of State. He was Paul VI. Anyway, we had a fine working arrangement with the Italian mafia about the movement of money, as I said. I met Montini once, I think in 1951. The new one had been in Venice, Luciani. There was another one from Venice. I know, but not quite the same one. That was back in the 60s, but the new pope posed quite a problem. He had been told there were certain irregularities in the IOR. That's the Vatican Bank. And the new pope was inclined to be honest and was demanding a full review of the books and so on. If this happened, a good deal would have been uncovered, so the pope had to go. It was that simple, Gregory. Politics had nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. Couldn't someone have cooked the books? Was murder necessary? You don't understand the whole picture, Gregory. The mafia was involved in this, up to their eyebrows. And if any of it had come out, someone would have talked and pointed to us. We couldn't have that. We had to get rid of Dag Hammarskjöld. He was interfering with the uranium people in the Congo. It was nothing personal at all. How'd you do it? Our station chief in Rome ran the show. Contacts in the Vatican, especially with Bonetti, the Pope's director. My God. Old Renata cost us plenty on our payroll since God knows when. And our political psychological division worked on this to put the blame on the KGB. And the P2 Lodge was also involved. They were ours. The what? The P2 Lodge was an Italian Masonic group, and early in the 1970s we got our hands on it. It was designed to attract right-wing Italian bankers and businessmen to combat the very active Italian Communist Party. No, if the Pope had started something, it would have wrecked years of hard work on our part and ruined some of our more important assets. In the end, it was money, not Renaissance-style politics, that did Luciani in. Does the Vatican know now? They suspect it, but would rather not know anything. After the Pope assumed room temperature, we consolidated and revamped the system. There was quite a bit of mopping up to do. We had to kill off a number of Italian players who had been pushed out of the picture and were longing to get back in the money. One hanged himself from a bridge in England, obviously killed himself out of remorse. Stalin once said it was not difficult to execute the murder, but much more difficult to arrange a suicide. Joseph was a clever man. And he said, "No man, no problem." Now, that one I know. A friend and co-worker of mine had that up over his desk. I'm not joking. Oh, I believe it, Robert. It is lawful to be taught by your enemies. I detect a critical attitude here, Gregory. You have to realize that the amount of money we were and are making from our drug partnerships is nothing to walk away from. Vast sums of money, Gregory, and enormous political power therefrom. I can see that, but one day they'll go too far. The Kennedy business is a classic example of why nothing will ever come from this sort of thing. If you publish the zipper material, you'll already have what I'm going to give you. You'll only excite the conspiracy buffs, all of whom will gather together and heap coals of fire on your head. Let us say that you write a newspaper article on what I just told you. It would never get published, and within minutes of your submitting it to an editor, we would be notified. And then you'd shoot me. No, trash you, laugh at you, get our little broken down academics to piss on you. The press would ignore you completely, and eventually you'd have to find something else to do. Now, on the other hand, if you'd been one of us and had inside knowledge and worse, proof, you'd perish very quickly. You'd have faulty brakes while driving on dangerous mountain roads, an overdose of some kind of popular drug, end up dead in an overheated apartment. Things are like that. But as an outsider, just laughter and silence. Of course, there are those who believe you. And if you wrote about this business with the Pope and mentioned some Italian names, you might get different treatment. The bomb under the front seat of your car, something crude like that. But we wouldn't have done it, and I would recommend against stirring those people up. We'd look into your tax records and turn the IRS loose on you. Or let your wife know you were boffing a nice waitress at a cheap local motel, or one of your nice children would be introduced to dangerous drugs that's more effective than a bomb in a car, or someone shooting you dead in a parking garage. The Italians tend to be very emotional. We do not. The Italians once said, "He who went softly went safely, and he who went safely went far." It would be less messy if they actually practiced that sentiment. By the way, Robert, why did you go after the other pope? I assume that's the one that got shot by the Arab in front of the Vatican? Yes, but not an Arab, a Turk. They do not like to be equated with Arabs. That one, actually, we thought that if we had done him right in front of everybody, it would draw a lot of attention. And we really could blame it on the KGB. It was a perfect setup. He was a Polak who was agitating the solidarity people against Russia. So who would be the most logical suspect? And we had been financing the Turkish Grey Wolves for some time. They got the hitman for us. Of course, he didn't know anything, so no one shot him in the courtroom. Cui bono? But for no other reason? Isn't that enough? Turn all the world's Catholics against the Russians in a hurry? Let's see here. One pope for sure, another shot, a dead UN chief, a dead American president, assorted deceased South American leaders, a Pakistani or two, and at least one high-level Indian, so on. I would hope not all for such trivial motives. Turning a huge number of people against Russia is not a trivial motive at all. The wheel does turn, Robert. It does. And what is now at the bottom comes to the top. Out of curiosity, have you killed any Israelis? No. They know just how far to go. And we work very closely with them. They do a lot of our dirty work for us. They blew up the Marine barracks in Lebanon. And of course, we blamed it on the Arabs. It goes on, Gregory. And if you'd sat in my chair and walked in my shoes, you'd be a bit more understanding. Well, this isn't aimed at you, of course. If it were, I wouldn't be defending you to the monkeys when they jabber about you. They aren't worth much. I think your problem is that you were never in a position of command and at a high level. If you had been, you'd be less judgmental. I'm just an amateur, Robert. Just a dilettante. Thank God. Call concluded at 11:45 p.m. Central Standard Time, February 16th, 1997.
You probably have a lot of doubts about this, but if you did what I did, studied it, you'd find out that it's just one of the many horrible, horrible things that this government that nobody knows about that's running things do. I mean, there's nothing they won't do. Nothing. And it's got to stop. It's got to stop before we don't have a democracy anymore.